On May 19th, 2008, in Boston, Massachusetts, 22-year-old Rebecca Payne returned home from work and fell asleep on the couch in her living room. She lived off campus in a Mission Hill apartment, sharing the space with a roommate. Sadly, that would be the last time she was seen alive. At approximately 6:30 a.m., a 911 call was made. When authorities arrived at apartment 23 on the third floor, where Rebecca lived, they were met with a chaotic scene. The apartment was in disarray, and a trail of blood led from the living room to the bathroom, eventually ending in the bedroom. There, Rebecca was found lying lifeless on the floor in a pool of her own blood. Investigators determined she had been shot multiple times. Rebecca Payne was a kind-hearted religious college student who was nearing graduation. Known for her compassion and dedication to helping others, her murder stunned those who knew her. With no known enemies, her death left many in disbelief. The police launched an investigation in hopes of finding out who was responsible for the brutal killing of Rebecca Payne. This is her story. Rebecca Payne was born in 1985 in New Milford, Connecticut, to her parents, Nicholas and Virginia Payne. She was their only child. Her father was originally from England, and her mother came from the Seychelles Islands. Rebecca had a stable and loving childhood. Her father worked as an electrical engineer, and her mother was a tennis coach. From a young age, Rebecca was deeply spiritual and dedicated to her faith. She regularly participated in youth group activities and helped raise money through her church for people with disabilities. Known for her kind heart and radiant smile, Rebecca was always willing to help others. She worked as a waitress at a restaurant called Pancake Breakfast, which supported charitable efforts for struggling families. In high school, Rebecca excelled both academically and athletically. She participated in chorus, worked on the yearbook editing team, and played on the track, tennis, and hockey teams. She graduated from New Milford High School in 2004 and was accepted into Northeastern University in Boston, Massachusetts, an elite school. Driven by her passion for sports and a desire to help others, Rebecca decided to major in sports medicine. At Northeastern, she served as president of the athletic training club and worked as a clinical student at Dartmouth-Hitchcock Medical Center in New Hampshire. She built a strong social circle at the university, including two close friends named Jessica and Lauren. During her freshman year, she met a man named Shane while watching a Yankees versus Red Sox game. They fell in love quickly, and their relationship thrived. Rebecca lived off campus in the Mission Hill Apartments, located near downtown Boston, sharing the space with a roommate. She frequently hosted small gatherings at her apartment, creating a warm, inclusive environment for friends. Her academic and personal life were going well, and she was set to graduate in May 2008. On May 19th, 2008, Rebecca returned home from work and fell asleep on her living room couch. Around 6:30 a.m., a 911 call came in. When police arrived at apartment 23 on the third floor, the door was open and blood was visible on the carpet. There were no signs of forced entry. As officers explored the apartment, they followed a trail of blood from the living room to the bathroom, bedrooms, and finally to Rebecca's bedroom, where she was found shot multiple times in the head, arms, torso, and legs. She had been brutally murdered. The police called Virginia, who was devastated by the news and had to break it to her husband, Nicholas. The couple, overwhelmed with grief and confusion, traveled to Boston for answers. At the crime scene, investigators found shell casings throughout the apartment and determined Rebecca was killed in the living room. The scene suggested she had planned to unwind after work, perhaps nap, do homework, clean, or order takeout. Evidence of these intentions, like food containers and her laptop, were still present. A blood-stained Charlie card, a local transportation pass, was found, and the sliding glass door to the balcony was open, though there were no signs of forced entry. This led authorities to believe Rebecca may have known her killer. Nothing was stolen, and there was no indication of sexual assault, making robbery or assault unlikely motives. Rebecca's roommate was in the process of moving out, so the apartment was mostly Rebecca's alone. She often stayed there by herself unless she had visitors. Investigators couldn't get much information from the roommate due to her absence. With no eyewitnesses, police canvassed the area and interviewed neighbors. Many admitted to hearing gunshots, loud noises, and cries from Rebecca's apartment around 3 a.m. on May 19, but no one had called 911. Some dismissed the noises, thinking it was just another city incident or doubting whether it was serious enough to report. When Rebecca's parents arrived in Boston, they were shown crime scene photos and were devastated. Investigators, convinced the killing was personal due to the nature of the attack and the lack of defensive wounds, focused on those closest to Rebecca. A neighbor mentioned seeing a suspicious black van near the apartment, and police wanted to review surveillance footage. However, the maintenance employee had failed to replace the tape, so nothing was recorded that night. This was frustrating for the investigators. The same maintenance worker had found Rebecca and called 911. He had access to all apartment units and lived on site. Adding to suspicion, he had a criminal history and a red stain on his door, possibly blood. Police swabbed the stain and questioned him. He claimed he was home with his wife that night. Meanwhile, authorities looked into Rebecca's Charlie card, retracing her steps from that night. Surveillance showed her returning home around 10:30 p.m., walking casually and alone, without signs of distress or being followed. The stain on the maintenance man's door was tested and found not to be blood. With no DNA evidence tying him to the crime, he was cleared. Investigators circled back to the black SUV seen that night and traced it to a location near a local hospital, close to Rebecca's building. They questioned Shane, Rebecca's boyfriend, who was out of town in upstate New York with family. Phone records showed he had spoken to Rebecca around midnight, confirming she was alive at that time. He was cleared as a suspect. Despite their efforts, the case went cold for years. Rebecca's parents, desperate for closure, buried their daughter with the support of over 500 mourners at her funeral. In 2013, investigators got a break. Anthony Wright, a known drug dealer who had been shot in the eye, offered information in exchange for a reduced sentence. He claimed Cornell Smith, another dealer, and Michael Balba, a customer, were with him in a black SUV parked near Rebecca's apartment that night. Cornell had told them he planned to kill a woman who had stabbed him and reported him to police. He pointed to Rebecca's apartment and said he would climb the balcony and attack when she slept. Anthony claimed he saw Cornell enter the apartment and later heard Rebecca screaming and gunshots. There was no known link between Rebecca and Cornell, and she had never been involved with him. However, investigators discovered two women who lived in the building below Rebecca, and one of them resembled her. These women were tied to drugs and had connections with Cornell. It became clear that Rebecca was killed due to mistaken identity. Cornell had targeted the wrong woman. The Payne family was heartbroken all over again. In 2014, Anthony passed away, complicating prosecution. Michael Balba, the driver, refused to cooperate. However, Cornell was already incarcerated on drug charges, and prosecutors worked to strengthen the case. They discovered letters Cornell wrote in prison, including one to a judge, in which he admitted responsibility for Rebecca's death. One letter read, "The unfortunate passing of Rebecca Payne at the hands of I and Cornell Allen Smith III." His 6-page journal describing the crime became a key piece of evidence. Cornell pleaded guilty to voluntary manslaughter and firearm possession. He was sentenced to 18 to 20 years, the maximum for voluntary manslaughter, and an additional 5 years for unlawful possession of a firearm. Although justice was served, the pain for Virginia and Nicholas Payne remained. Eventually, they moved back to the Seychelles to escape the painful memories tied to their daughter. Back in Milford, Connecticut, where Rebecca's story began, the community continued to remember her.